Welcome back to Plague Scythe Studios, everyone. Ryan here, and by popular demand, I am checking out the new Archetype Plini plugin by Neural DSP. It's hardly a secret that I'm a fan of what Neural DSP has done with their past plugin suites. From the Fortin Amps collaborations to the Dark Glass plugin, they've really set up a one-stop shop for contemporary high-gain rhythm guitar and bass guitar tones, to the point that for a lot of players, if you're going down that route, you don't even need any other recording gear. As I've shown in blind shootouts, they really keep up, if not surpass, the actual tube heads or pedals that they're modeling. So anytime Neural's coming out with something new, obviously I'm interested. But now that they're collaborating with a progressive player like Plini, who is absolutely dominating his own corner of progressive rock and heavy metal, this opens up several new doors in terms of amplifier simulation, as well as the other effects that they ship in these product suites. So it's very exciting, not only for players that like the raunchy riffage, but also lead and progressive players that may have felt a bit left out in some of the prior VST plugins by Neural. So for a quick physical rundown, of the VST, all of you that have purchased the Neural DSP stuff or used it in the past will feel right at home. The navigation, the layout is pretty much identical, minus the kind of cool progressive, whitewash look. It's those little touches. I do appreciate that. And stuff like the tubes lighting up the more that you increase the gain. That's nice. It's not distracting. It's just kind of cool. So starting with the main menu bar, you have the same input gate, stereo mono controls, as well as a high or low oversampling option. There are several stock presets shipped that Plini supposedly himself made, and they all are really great. In fact, all of the sound demos you'll be hearing in this video, I actually use the presets and then tweak them to my liking. That's something I basically never do with rhythm guitar sounds, but out of the box, they all they work. And especially get the kind of progressive vibe you would want in terms of the echo and the post effects. Over here you have your master output to balance with the master volume of the amplifiers. There's a newcomer in the pre-effect section with the compressor pedal, and that model is kind of your typical high-end solid-state compressor pedal. This is activated by default on practically all of the lead and the clean presets that is shipped with this plugin, as it should be. It works really well. It is extremely transparent, but it does the job that a compressor needs to do. And as such, anything that isn't just straight high gain chords, I'm probably using it as well. The overdrive pedal is a return to Neural DSP's comfort zone, as this is certainly your sort of TS9, TS808 affair, though I'm willing to wager there's at least a touch of modification going on, because unlike with a lot of those stock Tube Screamer circuits, I actually really like turning the drive all the way up, or nearly all the way up, and usually I wouldn't go past 9 o'clock. I feel that symmetrical, smooth distortion doesn't really play nicely in the way that I play, but it actually sounds great when you gun the drive control, especially with the other amplifier models. So that speaks to both the quality of the pedal and the amps as well. Of course, it definitely does your typical metal boost thing for rhythms and leads, but definitely something you want to play around with on the two lower gain amplifiers. With the amplifier section, Neural ups the ante once again to include not 2, but 3 fully independent amplifiers. So we've progressed from a single channel amp with the Nameless, which has 2 inputs, so it's almost like a 2-channel amp, to the Fortin NTS, which is a full-fledged 2-channel amp with a really versatile first channel, so it's almost like having 3. And now we have 3 independent amplifier sounds. Starting with the clean amp, this is kind of your typical blackface American style clean affair. It kind of behaves like a Fender both in the tone stack and in the gain structure. to where you can get super pristine cleans to just a touch of dirt and a little bit of tube breakup the higher you push the gain control, and especially interacts with compressors and the tube screamer overdrive in a way that you would expect. Like the other amplifiers in the collection, this uses a typical tone stack as well as a presence control and even a bright switch that you can toggle to add more definition to your high frequencies. With the Crunch amp, this thing kind of reminds me of like a more vintage style Friedman on the lower wattage end, or say a Paul Reed Smith Archon. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting out of this, because the gain controls kind of range from that edge of breakup if you roll off your volume knob all the way up to a decent full-blown rhythm amp. It is just voiced in a way to where it's mid-heavy and works really well for those kind of more vintage tones, and especially for leads, whether it be over top cleans or, you know, full-blown high gain rhythm sound. So a lot of the lead presets do use this amp, especially boosted, especially the compressor, and it plays well with all of those. Given Neural's experience with the Fortin amp circuits, it shouldn't be surprising to anyone that their high gain amp in this plugin is also an absolute monster. And this is kind of your rectifier 5150 Soldano kind of sound somewhere in that mix. The texture of the gain kind of reminds me more of a Mesa amp, but the EQ is kind of a wash between them all. Whatever it's based on, it is definitely your go-to for the Dream Theater sound, or the, you know, Metallica rhythm sound, or your full-blown gent sound. So it can kind of do all three. And unlike many other similarly voiced amp plugins, this thing actually works straight out of the box with extended range guitars with that overdrive pedal. That's generally something that never works for me. I find myself having to do a lot of frequency manipulation in the pre-section, cutting a lot of the lows, boosting the overall level, and oftentimes just bypassing an overdrive. But all this works, and it's still articulate and has the low-end definition that I want out of it. So definitely a badass amp for rhythms. We have another first appearance in the form of the 9-band graphic EQ, and this is placed directly after the amplifier in the post section. This kind of covers all of your critical frequencies for guitar playing, ranging from 65 Hertz to 16,000 Hertz, and ranges from 12 decibels of boost to 12 decibels of cut. And I love this inclusion because I am constantly using a graphic EQ either in the loop or in a plugin or in some amp modeling software to achieve my rhythm tones especially, but it can also be really handy for cutting out some of those really low bass frequencies, like below 80 Hertz. Sometimes I'll even cut a little bit to like 125 or 250 if you want to have a lead or a clean part sit in the mix a little differently without interacting too much with the bass frequencies, or simply boosting the mids or cutting a particularly honky mid frequency. Definitely great inclusion. I'd love to see this in all their plugins. The cabinet section sees the return of high quality impulse responses from ML Sound Labs once again, though I think these are different speakers, or at the very least a different cabinet from the last NTS and Nameless impulse responses, but more on that in a minute. So also same microphone collections, 3 dynamic microphones, 1 condenser, a pair of ribbons, and same functionality, being able to change the position as well as the distance level, panning if you're using this in stereo, phase alignment, all that good stuff. So super powerful cabinet emulation, and more importantly, they sound good out of the box. Compared to the NTS and Nameless though, which I've shown are pretty much the same thing, those use a 70 watt rated vintage 30 and kind of a Mesa standard cabinet size cab, and it's kind of perfect for the amps that they were paired with, because it's just the right amount of aggression and bright top end, scoop mid end, a lot of bass, but still, you know, enough mids to stick out in a mix. This cabinet by comparison is rather mellow. It lacks the aggressive upper frequencies of the NTS and Nameless, and I think that's a good thing. It definitely meshes better with the included amplifiers, but do know that you are getting a different set of cab IRs. I'm not sure what it is. I'd love to know what speaker and cabinet combination were used. For all I know, it could just be a different V30. It kind of sounds like one, but you know, I'm not going to make bets on this one. So if you do know, please leave a comment down below. And that brings us to the last section with the delay and reverb pedals, both of which are newcomers to the neural universe as well. And these are two extremely powerful echo effects. They both do kind of a dual purpose for each, with the delay kind of working as both a pristine digital delay sound as well as being able to have a fully saturated tape delay sound, which you can blend between the two. So if you want kind of that squashed vintage delay or more pristine digital delay, you can blend between the two of those. You have several controls in terms of tempo, the time, which if you link it to your DAW, meaning if you're at like say 152 beats per minute, then that will change whether it's on a dotted eighth note or quarter note, all the way up to a whole note dotted. The tone control is particularly useful for taming the lower and higher frequencies of the delay trails to keep your guitar prominent front and center while still being able to hear the delay, as well as making them a touch more vintage sounding, since you are kind of making them a bit more lo-fi. You also have a modulation switch, which can add a kind of a cool chorusy effect without using a chorus. It's not overbearing. A lot of the times I don't like modulation delay. This one pulls it off in a nice subtle way though. And then of course you can unsync from the tempo if you'd rather just run straight time. And I always keep the ping pong switch engaged because that's what a good stereo delay is in my books, at least. So aside from your stock dry, wet mix, and feedback, this is a really powerful delay for being so simplified, and you can get a lot of different sounds out of it. For the reverb, this also kind of pulls double duty in the fact that the space control kind of controls whether it's more of a traditional room or hall sounding reverb, not quite a plate or spring, but a hi-fi good reverberation. And then the more you go towards space, the more it's this multi-dimensional, never-ending echo that honestly earns its name, space. So this, combined with the delay, can really create these overarching harmonics that it sounds like there's a synth playing in the background, which makes it really cool for ambient. You'll hear that on a lot of these demo takes. And like the delay pedal, you can control the reverb time as well as a low pass and high pass to once again kind of tame those echo trails. Now you throw all that together in one plugin and you've got like the perfect prog lead guitarist plugin package. It includes so many things that I feel are kind of holding back the more rhythm-centric high gain stuff with the Fortin amps, and really complements what a modern guitarist might need, ranging from the cleanest of cleans to the dirtiest of dirt. Needless to say, I am once again very impressed by another Neural DSP collection. They never cease to amaze me with the amplifier simulations. They especially surprise me every time here in the last couple of plugins with venturing into other effects like with the reverb and delay, the compressor here. I'm really looking forward to what they're going to release in the future because, you know, from here on out, who knows what it can be. But the more products they release, the more difficult and drawn out this whole should you buy it part of the video becomes, because I can definitely see there being a sizable faction of players that maybe liked the accuracy and maybe even some of the tones that the Fortin collaboration plugins provided, but maybe they're just simply not into the whole chug thing all the time. And there's probably several people that's like, yeah, this sounds good, but I still need to use several other plugins to complete my signal chain. And this, I think, offers a lot more value for those players that, you know, maybe they do need a delay and reverb and different kind of overdrive and a few more amp channel sounds to play with. And for that, I think this definitely has the same amount of value, if not more, depending on how you look at it and depending on what features you use versus their past stuff. It does come in a little bit more expensively. So it's $135 US, a 35% increase over the NTS and Nameless. But now that those two are kind of in parity as far as the features go, I think this sort of earns it. For starters, this does have a third independent amplifier channel versus the 2-channel NTS and 2-ish channel Nameless. So there's 33% more value in the amplifier realm. You do have an exclusive compressor pedal here. You do have some exclusive EQ controls. And of course, the reverb and delay pedals, which I am really impressed with. The question is all that going to be useful for you? And if so, how often are you going to use it? How often would something like the grind pedal be a better fit for you versus the overdrive pedal? And that's stuff you got to answer for yourself. But I find that I fall in this funny little middle ground where I still 10-to-1 prefer the Fortin stuff for extended range guitars for most of my rhythm work, but pretty much anything else, this is just great. I can absolutely foresee myself tracking about every prog type demo I do with this plugin if I don't feel like using an amp modeler or, you know, real amplifiers or whatever, because it is that touch sensitive, it is that immersive, it's that inspirational. And that's always a good, you know, kind of signal for me. No matter how good something sounds or realistic, if it inspires me to play guitar, to write new stuff like a real tube head does, then it's probably a good plugin or good simulation. So it definitely checks all the boxes for me, but if you are like me, have similar tastes, and you want to dabble in kind of both sides of these plugins, you're looking at $235 for software, and that's a good chunk of change for a lot of people. You know, at that point, it still can be good value. There's plenty of other plugins out there that cost more for amplifier sims. They're also more versatile. In my opinion, most of them don't sound half as good as these do. So the real question is, are you going to use it? Is it going to be something that is going to be worth your while? And if so, then that's awesome, because, you know, at $235, you'd be hard pressed to buy a preamp simulation pedal and an IR loader and an overdrive pedal, and that's pretty much your entire budget. At the same time, I think if you put a little bit more cash towards it, you can also get something that's a dedicated, amp modeler all-in-one hardware package. So it's ultimately going to come down to your preferences, how you're going to use it. But in terms of quality, again, 5 out of 5 stars for me. and a high recommendation to those that are not in the Neural DSP ecosystem yet, and that like this sort of genre that this stuff represents. Now, if you'll allow me to spitball for a couple minutes again, like I did with the last video, I think we're getting to the point with Neural DSP's releases that in a couple more of these, software releases, it might make sense to start meshing features between them all. I have a strong dislike for DLC content in general, especially for this kind of stuff. Just sell it all, or free updates are always great, but I'm always have a bit of an aversion to the way that companies like Bias Effects or Amplitude do it. It's not nearly as bad as it could be, or even as it used to be in many markets, but I generally don't like paying for this thing and saying, oh, well, we've actually held back the best metal amps here, and we've held back the best vintage amps here, and all the sound that you're hearing, you're going to actually have to spend another 50% more to obtain. So I'm glad they didn't go that route. But with the kind of individual plugins they have set up now, if they keep releasing more, I'm going to have like 8 to 10 slots of nothing but Neural DSP that will show up when I search for this stuff. And while that's certainly not the end of the world, I would personally love to see a Neural DSP launcher that has all of this stuff, that has all of these sections, that has all of the pedals they've ever made, all of the amps ever made, that you can flip between. So you could use your Fort and Grind here, you could use your Fort and Zool, you can use the compressor, whatever else they come out with in the future. Same with the amp channels. You'll have the Fort and stuff. You'll have these. If you're playing bass guitar and you've bought the dark glass part, you can buy, use that in this section as well, and just keep adding on to make it its own kind of bias effects, bias amp, Line 6, Helix native. You can name a million other software packages that do a similar thing. But I think it'd be a great thing for those of us that have invested in pretty much all of their offerings, who don't want to load up like 4 instances to get the mix and match they want, because I found the grind pedal does sound great through this amp, and I found that the cabinet section sounds great with this, and I found that I like the reverb. The problem is you have to load up like 3 or 4 instances to get that combination. So I would personally like to see a launcher that includes all of that, and that is, you can segment it totally. It would be fine. But if you own 2 or more plugins, then you could just load that up and have all that stuff at your disposal for your own tone. So, who knows if that'll ever happen. That's just what I would like to see as a consumer, and it would be super handy, valuable, I think, and make it that much more worthwhile to buy multiple. So just my 2 cents. So I believe we will call that a review. Hopefully you found some enjoyment and information in this video. Any questions and comments, as always, please leave them down below. I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.